You know, I'm actually kind of a, how do you say this nicely? Sonic fan. I've been playing the games for years, my first being Sonic Heroes back on the day on the PS2 if I recall correctly. From there, I ended up playing a bunch of Sonic games, mainly the Adventure series, Unleashed of course, and pretty much every single Sonic Wii game under the sun, and even Sonic Freeriders for the freaking 360. Shout out to the GOAT, by the way, Black Knight, my favorite Sonic game. Of course, I played all the modern games too. In fact, I was the only person in my whole store to pre-order Sonic Forces in my actual whole district. But enough about mistakes of the past. Let's talk about some mistakes in the present. Apart from the Sonic collection on the DS, I never actually really gave the OG Sonic games a decent chance. I got stuck on the underwater zone in Sonic 1 and I just never went back. I've played Sonic 3 once as well on one of those Sega Mega Drive classic consoles, but you know what? As someone who absolutely loves the 3D games to death, I want to go back. Let's see why fans love the OG games and why they believe Sonic had a rough transition to 3D. Let's go back to where it all began, in a familiar zone, with nothing but a blue hedgehog and a dummy thick scientific man to stand in his way. This is Sonic the Hedgehog. Green Hill Zone is and always will be the most iconic Sonic zone, and for good reason. Straight away, Green Hill Zone establishes the main motif for Sonic. He's fast. You use this first zone to get used to controlling the blue blur by testing his limits of speed, jumping, dashing, and just how he interacts with enemies in the environment. By the way, Sonic actually controls really great. I know you kind of would expect it to be a little bit on the clunky side, but honestly, you have a really decent control of his speed, and it's easy to tell his whereabouts and where he's gonna land. You'll also be collecting rings, which is your lifeline in Sonic games. As long as you have a single ring with you, you can keep getting hit and just keep getting back up. It is a really smart way to let players be more comfortable with experimenting with the physics of the game and interacting with the world. It will just let you take more risks because you know you can always come back a little bit. You might also get lucky enough to keep your rings until the end of the level, because if you keep 50, you'll hop into a bonus stage to grab a Chaos Emerald, which there are 6 of by the way, but I'll talk about this a little bit later. Let's get to the first boss, which is someone you'll come to love or hate dearly, Dr. Eggman. He's really not much of a threat in, well, any of these boss stages, especially not the first, with nothing but his ball hanging out. Hit him a few times and he's down, running off to the next zone. You'll free some little fellas and continue on. This is a great introduction to Sonic, the premise of the entire series, what to expect, and it's just enough to keep you hooked. You know what? Let's whack all the stages on a tier list, just for fun. You know, Green Hill Zone is a great stage, very easy, not much challenge, but it's pretty fun. You know, it's iconic, it's got great music, honestly, what's not to love? Perhaps that it does feel short despite having 3 stages, like the motif of Green Hill Zone starts to feel a little bit of a drag, and because it doesn't offer a crazy amount of difficulty, I can kind of see why it's not the greatest stage, but I think for now, let's just put it in a strong B tier. Next up we have Marble Zone, which directly follows Green Hill Zone. It has a vibrant colour above, but as you go below into the meat of the zones, it has a almost cool medieval aesthetic. This place is very important as it shows the second big motif of Sonic games, that being platforming. Instead of zooming across the zone, you'll be carefully climbing through various traps like spikes, lava, and flying enemies. This zone is still relatively easy though, but it can catch you off guard quite a bit. Green Hill Zone almost lulls you into this false sense of security that the game will be a fast breeze, but Marble Zone reminds you that you aren't necessarily the master just yet, especially if you're aiming to get all the Chaos Emeralds. Remember how I said there are 6 of them and that you need 50 rings? Now, in order to actually keep your 50 rings, if you get hit by anything, your rings scatter and you're gonna lose pretty much most of them. So if you go past the 30% mark of a level and you get hit, there's a big chance you're gonna miss out on a chance to get an emerald and you're probably just gonna want to restart the whole level. This, if I'm honest, I'm not the biggest fan of, because I think that going fast and accurate is the best part of Sonic, and having to take my time kind of puts a damper on that. But I'm sure once I get used to playing the OG games, this will be less of an issue. But even with memorizing everything, Marble Zone has a lot of waiting around as well, which is one of my big complaints. You gotta wait for enemies to move, for blocks to travel, traps to move out of the way. The game does give you some tools to deal with as well, like power-ups, and you get to see how far you can take them, which is nice. But all in all, I think less waiting around and more active platforming would be great. Eggman here is also relatively easy as well, with you pretty much just doing the same thing as the other fight, except now you're jumping over fire to hit him, instead of just jumping to hit him. So, it's pretty easy. Honestly, Marble Zone is not a huge offender, it's just a bit of a stark contrast to the first level, and it does implement a bunch of good things and shows you how to take your time and kind of shows you what to expect with the platforming sections of Sonic. I understand it's slow because it's more to introduce new players to that aspect, and at least the visuals are nice enough to help keep the level engaged. If I'm honest, I'm going to place Marble Zone in B tier. Okay, Spring Yard Zone is up next. This stage is the first real test of the gamer, combining both the speed elements and the platforming elements that we've experienced in Green Hill Zone and Marble Zone. This is really a stage where you do a lot of experimentation with what you can get away with and try and put your newfound Sonic skills to use. I learned pretty quick that going fast as I wanted wasn't really an option. There's a lot of, well, pretty brutal enemy placements and traps that almost seem to punish you for going too fast, almost if the game is upset at you for some reason. You know, you've got enemies with spikes on top of them that are at the end of huge big run bits, bounce pad that launch you back down in the opposite direction for going too high because you were going fast. My main grievance was with this cool half-pipe section that gets ruined because you're going too fast to dodge the second spiked ball. I understand wanting to add some difficulty, but I feel like implementing enemies in parts where Sonic can go fast really interrupts the flow of the games. Just let the boy run and save the tougher enemies and traps for the slower platform sections. I understand sprinkling a couple of cheeky boys in for good measure, but things that the player can see coming would be much better, giving them that split-second chance to change their direction and adding a bit more intensity rather than punishment into the zones would be amazing. But despite the annoyances, this is actually still one of my favourite stages in the game. Once you get the hang of it and you've played through it a few times, the later acts become easier and easier, and once you get going fast and the stage actually lets you, it feels like you earned it, which is great. But a bunch of these acts are held back by annoying enemy placement, and once again, more waiting around. But damn, if this isn't my favourite song of all the zones in the entire game. It's funky, fresh, and easy to listen to in the background. The boss easy once again with Eggman thrusting into the ground and you gotta pound him till he runs away, but honestly, this stage is pretty good despite its grievances. Great speed where it lets you, but very annoying when it stops you. Honestly, the music is amazing, and I'm actually gonna bump it up a tier just because of the music and the fact that you do get to go fast, and a lot of it is partly your fault, but partly the level's fault. I'm just gonna put it in A for now. Labyrinth Zone. Oh, Labyrinth Zone, my old arch nemesis. I think pretty much everyone, myself included, has issues with this zone. In fact, back in the day, if you were a true blue fair dinkum Aussie, you would watch Good Game, and I actually sent in a mail to Good Game asking how to get past Labyrinth Zone, and they sent a reply back saying it's hard and to look up game guides. Next freaking Good Game episode, I see them talking about the difficulty of water levels, talking about Labyrinth Zone. Damn, I don't know if that's a coincidence, but I don't freaking think so. Anyway, let's get back to it. Let's talk about some good stuff of Labyrinth Zone. The premise of a sunken labyrinth is very, very cool, by the way, and I for one actually enjoy the breathing mechanic. Having a limited supply of air that makes you conform to either the speedy or slow gameplay style which you've been developing helps keep you engaged during the water segments. And I also like the water rushing bits and bits where you have to actually chase against the water, even if the water is a bit too fast and it's not really fair. But that's about it for positive comments. The main issue, of course, is the fact that you're underwater in this level, and I really feel like they could have done something a bit more dynamic with the water here. You know, being underwater just makes you very slow, which boils down the entire level to just a very slow-paced Sonic level. It's kind of funny. Think about Labyrinth Zone with no water and just a normal pace, and it's actually kind of cool. The enemy placements make it very frustrating to navigate underwater as well, so since you're accustomed to a certain range of motion and speed at this point, and because they also hide in the worst spots possible, you're probably going to get hit and lose your rings a lot. I did not even bother picking up a Chaos Emerald on this part of the run. What I personally think would really help this whole zone is to change it completely. The boss of this zone is the most interesting one so far though, with it not being a boss, but you having to race and escape the rushing water to try and catch him. I actually kind of like this section, even though it's pretty tough and unforgiving, but completing it is pretty damn satisfying. It does suck though that if you die here, all you have is a single shield to help you out, and I definitely died here the most on my playthrough and was happy to be done with the zone overall. This is kind of a thinking about it, it was okay, but a lot of this zone I really can't forgive its grievances. It just needs a rework completely, if I'm honest. It's just a slow slog, it has too much going on underwater, not enough speed, and the music is only okay. Honestly, I'm putting this in D for Drown. On to Starlight Zone, where we have forgone underground bullshit to beautiful interstellar goodness. This zone is pretty much just a improved Spring Yard Zone. We've got less bullshit, more speedy segments, and just more going. It is very refreshing coming from Labyrinth and almost feels like a reward for getting through such a slog of a previous zone. There's lots of great loops for diverging pathways as well, and the main gimmick of the stage being these fans that will push you in a certain direction, working both for and against you in defending your position. This also has a section at the top of the first zone with just 5 boxes which equal 50 rings before the end, which is a huge help that allows you to easily get a Chaos Emerald straight up. There are also some cheeky exploding enemies, but you get plenty of warning before they explode, which also helps complement the speedy or slow playstyle you're establishing. There's also these seesaws, which is another main gimmick that launch you upwards, and they are also using the final boss to throw bombs at Eggman. This is just a great stage. Fast, great platforming sections, it has room for Sonic to breathe, but also gives you a run for your money if you're too eager. The gimmicks fit well and feel fun to use, and the stage doesn't feel like it's working against you. Honestly, I think, I'm just gonna say it, this is the first S tier of the freaking series. The last major stage is upon us, Scrap Brain Zone. You wanna know why the developers called it Scrap Brain Zone? Because whoever made this scrapped his whole ass brain when he concocted this sinister brew of a level. Now, this level introduces a couple of things. Pitfalls and more underwater segments. Look, I kinda understand that pitfalls are a staple in a lot of games, especially platformers, but do you really need to put 2 of them right at the beginning of the zone, underneath a new platform type that immediately drops, especially on a life-based system game? Once again, it's that punishment for going too fast, but I don't think it's totally fair to the player. This level also has its fair share of waiting around, something I really did not miss if I'm gonna be honest. There are these disappearing platforms as well, which, while they are annoying, do provide a decent mix-up to the platforming, as you have to follow the rhythm and time your jumps pretty precisely. The second act is a lot more engaging than the first though, by offering more rhythmic platforming segments, which I actually do kind of like. I'll say the zone itself does look kind of nice, but once you get to Act 3, it becomes Labyrinth Zone's big bro and all is thrown out the window. We got nasty ass purple water, barely any bubbles. In fact, something I want to touch on is the fact that bubbles actually come out on a timer. So if you happen to miss it, you can do nothing but watch poor Mr. Hog drown. On to the boss fight. This is at least a small increase in difficulty, with us having to dodge Eggman's huge pillars. It's pretty easy to get squished and no rings, unfortunately, to help you out, so one hit and it's back to the checkpoint because squishing doesn't prevent anything. There's not much room for eager attacking either, as you've got to stay pretty attentive to where he's coming from, but once you get the pattern a little bit and use your rolly move to get out the way, it's not as bad. It's honestly a walk in the park. It's not as bad as Labyrinth Zone, but because the boss battle is at least engaging and some parts of the level have interesting ideas, this whole zone is pretty low compared to the rest of the levels. Honestly, I'm putting this in C tier. Wow, that was fast. Yep, Sonic 1 is very short, like an hour. But how did it make me feel? Sonic 1 was honestly a pretty decent romp. I had a lot of really good highs, but there is definitely some irritating lows. Like I said before, I do kinda give this game some slack because it was the Sonic debut, and I'm sure in the later games they'll work out some kinks. I'll also forgive it a bit more because it is so short, even though I said some of the zones are longer. Definitely having 3 acts does drag out the themes a bit, so I kinda wish they were 2 acts instead of 3, but honestly it's really only an extra 5 minutes. I'm kinda just nitpicking here, and there's so much good stuff already going on, and honestly I'm excited to continue my journey into the next Sonic game. Oh crap, I didn't talk about the bonus stages, did I? Okay, real quick, these bonus stages are really not my thing. The bouncing around feels pretty finicky and awkward, and because I'm getting the emeralds, it doesn't really do anything but, I guess, give you bragging rights and give you a man-child, so it's not really worth the price of admission, especially because in order to have a chance to get one, you need a pretty much flawless run in every Act 1 and 2 of the game to get all 6 emeralds, and then you're also playing slow, which kind of goes against the fun of Sonic. Honestly, these bastard zones go along Labyrinth Zone in bottom tier. Okay, to conclude, Sonic 1, pretty sick. Even from someone who doesn't have nostalgia for the OG games, I'd say it's still definitely worth a shot. It's literally an hour. I think it's all the time I got for now, you know, I'm kind of fast these days, but I hope you enjoyed yet another YouTuber's perspective on a 20-plus-year-old game that everyone's talked about to death. Until next time, oh, and before I forget, don't forget to keep shredding. See ya!